In a surprise move, the conservative Supreme Court reversed a lower court decision that actually sided with predatory payday lenders and would have dismantled the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. In other words, the Supreme Court's ruling today is incredibly good news. So in a 7-2 decision written by Justice Clarence Thomas, I'm living in an alternate reality. This is amazing. The court upheld as constitutional the Bureau's funding mechanism, which is based on profits from the Federal Reserve rather than an annual appropriation from Congress. So let me just back up a little bit and explain how this case made its way to the Supreme Court. It all started with payday lenders trying to dismantle the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which was established after the 2008 economic collapse in order to protect consumers, to ensure that consumers who have been screwed over or defrauded by financial institutions or banks are made whole by this agency, this government agency that investigates wrongdoing and ensures that consumers are refunded the money that they were scammed out of as a result of financial institutions. Now, the payday lenders absolutely hate the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau because they're basically engaging in oversight over things like payday lenders. And so what they tried to argue, the payday lenders, is that the way the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is funded, which is through the Federal Reserve, is unconstitutional, that they should instead be funded through Congress appropriating the money. But we all know what Congress appropriating money is like. That's when things get political, obviously. That's when the legalized bribery baked into our system comes to play. That's when the payday lenders can come in, legally bribe the politicians on both sides, and effectively encourage them and persuade them to dismantle this agency that actually does deliver for ordinary Americans. And in fact, they have returned $20 billion to ordinary Americans through the work that they're doing. Now, the case involved a decision by the conservative US Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit that said the funding mechanism Congress adopted to ensure the CFPB's independence violated the Constitution's command requiring congressional appropriation of money. The decision by a panel of 3 judges nominated by President Donald Trump said the agency's insulation from congressional committees doubled the violation. And the Biden administration luckily challenged that notion. They challenged the Fifth Circuit's decision. Upholding the appeals court decision could have implications for the funding of other regulatory agencies, the government said, including the Federal Reserve Board, and could even cast doubt on Social Security and payments to the national debt. And that was probably very likely also part of the agenda by the plaintiffs in this case. Now, the majority of justices luckily sided with the Biden White House. The CFPB, again, is literally the only government agency that seeks justice for ordinary Americans who have been screwed over by financial institutions. They have recovered more than $20 billion since it was established following the 2008 economic collapse. And the CFPB, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, was part of the Dodd-Frank Wall Street Reform and Consumer Protection Act, which was weak. It was a weak regulatory bill that did pass. It was watered down by the time it passed. But one of the good things that came along with it was the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Now, there were 2 dissenting judges, or justices, I should say. And those justices were Neil Gorsuch and Samuel Alito, who do believe that Congress should be the governing body that allocates the funds to the agency. Alito argued that, quote, there is apparently nothing wrong with a law that empowers the executive to draw as much money as it wants from any identified source for any permissible purpose until the end of time. But look, that's not actually true, okay? Because the way the CFPB is funded is important to understand. Basically, following the economic collapse of 2008, which of course was spurred by predatory lending, these financial institutions and banks engaging in predatory behavior, part of the Dodd-Frank law made it so banks would have to contribute to this, like, think of it as like an insurance fund, right? And through that insurance fund, the CFPB is funded. So the CFPB is not funded through your tax dollars. It's actually funded through the profits made by the banks. The very banks that screwed over countless Americans and led to one of the most devastating foreclosure scandals in American history. So I would much rather have the banks pay for the CFPB rather than have Congress appropriate taxpayer money for the CFPB. And as we know, Congress can easily be bribed into dismantling the CFPB, which is why the funding mechanism is not with Congress, it's with the Federal Reserve through funds that were provided by the banks. So this is good news, Waz, and I'm curious what you think about some of the rulings from the Supreme Court that have actually been pretty good. Like there have been terrible rulings, but this is an example of a good one.
Pausing here to deliver some honest truth as we do in our news coverage as well. TYT is facing challenges, guys, as the entire industry is. You know who could make the difference? You. If you hit the join button below, it's gonna make all the difference and keep us in business. We appreciate you, thank you.
Yeah, it's funny where the Supreme Court, where they ever rein themselves in, because I think they're self-aware to know that they can't just go full, mask off. Because I think legitimately people would start to, real people would start to question their legitimacy at all, right? I think they're self-aware enough to know that every now and again they have to do something that seems actually kind of sane and with the people. Couple of things that make me a little bit cynical about it, not to too much rain on the parade. We know that the people that are in charge of the CFPB are appointed by every single administration. And so when a Republican administration goes in there, what they essentially do is they appoint people who, throw sands in the gears. Like they make sure that it doesn't run properly. They don't have to defund it. They just make it not effective, right? And this is a tactic Republicans have been using since the 80s, where they will, appoint a very corporatist person to the National Labor Board, right? Which seems completely antithetical. It's like, wait, aren't they the adversaries of labor? So that's just generally how Republicans do it. But I'm just interested whenever the Supreme Court has some self-awareness about itself and does something like this. And another thing about it is that the beneficiaries of the CFPB can't be easily identified with any one particular group. Everybody has to bank. And the banks that are doing this, the financial institutions that are mostly affected by this, when they get caught with this, they're playing in dirty pool. Like JP Morgan Chase doesn't make real money off of these miscellaneous fees that they apply to people like me and you, right? Their real money is in, gaming the actual financial system. So I think there's a recognition that if you're doing this, God, you're so small change and ridiculous. But that being said, in the, basically the 15, 17 years that this thing has been in existence, $20 billion back in the pockets of real Americans. That's amazing.
It is, and I love that you talked about the difference in leadership during a GOP or Republican administration versus Democratic administration. During the Trump years, he had appointed Nick Mulvaney to the CFPB, a former member of Congress who despised the CFPB and desperately wanted to dismantle it on behalf of the payday lenders. And so he did, unfortunately, during his time, do that. But overall, it's really the only federal government agency tasked with serving ordinary Americans. I know that sounds crazy to say in a democracy where the government in general should be interested in serving ordinary Americans. But as we all know, with legalized bribery, that's not the case. And with legalized bribery, I don't want Congress to have any influence over this federal agency. So that's just a huge indictment of Congress, to say the least.
Thanks for watching The Young Turks, really appreciate it. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. You'll get to interact with us more. There's live chat emojis, badges. You've got emojis of me, Anna, John, JR. So those are super fun. But you also get playback of our exclusive member-only shows and specials right after they air. So all of that, all you gotta do is click that join button right underneath the video. Thank you.